Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Noelle from Gravity Union, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to today's session with a topic, how to plan your content journey across SharePoint, Purview, and Preserve365. With that, I'll pass it on to Leah.
Yes, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and I know for my co-presenter Neil, good evening. It's wonderful to have everyone here today. Again, my name is Leah Daniels. I am one of the many SharePoint analysts and records management specialists at Gravity Union. I have a master's from San Jose State in records and archival administration. I am an active member of ARMA Canada and the Archive Society of Alberta. And I also am a board member for their advocacy and outreach committee. So really getting this idea of preservation, really active digital preservation out there, I love. Also really keen on certifications and keeping up all of my skills in order to provide to everyone the tools that they need in order to pursue a full digital preservation life cycle. For those of you who may not be familiar with who Gravity Union is, we are a boutique consulting firm focused on compliance-inspired services. So we really help people transform kind of their current state organization and make sure that they're compliant with legislation, regulation, or any type of documentation that they need to be within. We have consultants across Canada, so depending on your time frame or your time zone, we can definitely be there to support you. For myself, I am located in Calgary, Alberta, but we do have people as far north as Whitehorse. We have our head office in Vancouver, and there's people as far east as Moncton, and we actually have one consultant at the moment in France. So that's exciting. So whatever your needs are, we're pretty sure that we can be there to support you and help you execute your records management program. With that, I'll pass it on to my co-presenter, Neil Cruikshanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Leah. I have entirely less qualifications than Leah. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, predominantly working in Microsoft. So I've got a lot of experience from a Microsoft Modern Workplace perspective, going from delivery through to architecture. And more recently, in the last couple of years, I've kind of moved over to Preservica and have kind of neatly fitted into this role whereby we are trying to make our kind of historic archiving or digital preservation solution kind of meet the needs of IT. Yeah, so it neatly segues us into this slide. Preservica has been around for over 20 years and was born from a requirement for the National Archives. So we've got a really rich pedigree of archives, like traditional archives, not archives in the sense of like from an IT perspective. For me, it's always been like a cheaper tier of storage, but catalogs and, compiling historic assets, whether they're images or videos and this, that, and the other. So we've got a whole range of different organizations in most every vertical you can think of globally. And effectively what we do is we work with kind of a partner ecosystem where we work with the best of breed partners to give us those regional experience. And in this case, obviously, we're really pleased to be partnering with Gravity Union. What do we do? So active digital preservation is really at the heart of our technology. And basically what it does is we take high value digital assets and we kind of ingest them into our solutions. So we do antivirus checking, fixity checksums, all that kind of thing. And then we effectively have a mechanism which is active digital preservation, and that allows us to effectively maintain the readability of those assets into the future. So we have some customers that retain detailed records with us, assets with us for perpetuity. But then in other verticals and industries, you'll have like design, records or building plans that need to be kept for 50 years. So what we do, as I say, as part of that active digital preservation piece, is ensure that that is always readable. So as you can see from the slide, there's 2,500 formats that we support currently. So Lotus 123, WordPerfect, all those kind of things that are potentially more difficult to render now, real media. And as I say, we take so we keep the original and we create a lightweight web renderable version of that. It's just so basically it's very simple to open, to view those assets. And I say we just perpetually do that into the future, so it's always there. We have assurances built into that as well. Again, from a data degradation perspective, we do all kinds of clever things like data scrubbing. But that's enough about me and that slide. So I think it's back over to you, Leah.
Yes. So I hope everyone is settled in and ready for a great session. What we are going to be talking about today is kind of the problem. What is this? Where is content chaos showing up for people? A lot of this is going to come from, again, some personal experience that from clients we've worked with and just some other kind of industry knowledge as well. And then again, some of this takeaway that we're going to get to is this framework. How can you begin this journey into kind of either moving directly into more of an active digital software like Preserve365, or is there kind of more of this planning stage that needs to happen? Wherever you are in your journey, we should be able to touch on it with what we have planned here for you today. All right. So the biggest thing that we are seeing is that the biggest challenge that organizations are facing is content isn't just in one place anymore. We see content spread across multiple locations, whether it's on-prem file shares, emails, desktops. Some people may already be moving to SharePoint, and people are using their OneDrive and maybe not understanding kind of the purposes of what some of these systems are. And sometimes it could be like content is living in other third-party applications. For example, some systems that I've worked with clients is like Laserfish or FileNexus, and the content is just isolated. It is it's isolated, it's separated, it's siloed from kind of that main repository of content. So there's copies, there's duplicates, there's all this content that people don't know what to do with. There's no single source of truth. There's no consistent governance across how to manage documents. And there's very little visibility of what exactly, exists or has value within an organization. This doesn't just refer to digital documents. We are also talking about physical documents as well. There is this need and kind of need and kind of rush behind things to kind of digitize physical documents, again, to reduce storage space, physical storage space. So these legacy applications that we're talking about aren't just digital. There is also some support that can be provided for those physical pieces as well. When content does live everywhere, it makes it so much harder to manage, protect, retain, and even trust the content that's in there. Again, we see multiple areas where somebody's got a Leah version 1 and Neil's working on the same document and it's his version 1.1, and content is similar, but it's not the same. And we want to make sure that everyone has access to the same content at the same time for the same needs. So there is a monetary loss when it comes to this content chaos, not knowing where your content is. There is monetary value associated to this. It's not just time. People, again, lose time searching for information. Usually if people spend time searching for something, they give up and they just create what they need. And again, that's where we see duplicates and copies of documentation. That lost time adds up quickly across the organization. If one person spends 10 minutes searching, another person spends 10 minutes working a day, like that's a lot of time lost for the organization when that effort can be put towards, instead of losing money, they're making money. There's also this increased risk. If you have privacy breaches, what content have they accessed? Have they accessed duplicates? Security incidents, compliance failures when information can't be properly controlled as well. Again, you can't manage what you don't know you have. So we really are trying to identify that single source of truth, who's creating content, where's content coming from, who is the owner of it, so that this management can be governed appropriately. When users also don't trust documents because they're not sure if it's the most recent, it really takes into question their integrity and authenticity of the information within, which furthermore makes decision-making so much harder. Instead of just pulling a document and knowing that that's what you need to know, there could be additional time taken to make sure that that information is valid and accurate and up to date. So we want to eliminate kind of those barriers and make sure that anything that's kind of on a corporate or business level, these decisions are being made effective and efficiently. Again, in order to make money. If we're not making money, we're losing money, and we all want companies to make money. From that cost perspective, organizations don't often realize how much they're spending as well on unnecessary storage and just repeating migration, just moving content around to different places. And again, that duplicated content as well. If you've got duplicate content and you're just moving content from space to space to space, again, that's increasing risk for the organization, and nobody really knows what's there, what's true, what's accurate, and what has value. Ultimately, this leads usually to a lower adoption and confidence in people's in users' systems. They don't know, again, what is the source of truth, what is the valuable pieces of information they should be taking, and just taking up extra time in their day that isn't needed. As you can see here on the screen, studies have been done, and I'm pretty sure you guys are all aware of this, that employees spend up to roughly 9 hours, so almost more than an entire day of work, trying to find content. And that could be they found it, but it's not relevant, it's not current, it's not accurate. And then they're, again, trying to create something quickly, which isn't always probably usually the best course of action. If you're creating something quickly and on the spot and ad hocly, you're usually missing some key pieces of what needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I mean, just to pick up on the poor decision making, I think that's probably more topical now than it ever has been from an AI perspective. Rubbish in, rubbish out. So it translates. It's not just people doing their work. It's actually coming into more modern technologies like AI. So yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So what is this slide? A lot of stuff. That's what it is. So basically, what we're trying to show you here in terms of the graph on the left-hand side is that over the last 10 years, because as digital data systems have kind of grown, there's been a 340% increase in digital standards. So that's a huge amount of change. And obviously what you can see on the screen as well is we've put a number of different kind of verticals there as well. And the number in the top right-hand corner is just a snapshot of kind of the number of compliance standards, governance standards that are specific to each of those different industries. And you kind of, might be asking yourself, why are you showing us this? I think the reality is that when you look at what Leah's just told you, and you take that and look at a slide like this, it just goes to show that if you haven't really got a handle on your data, if you don't understand what you've got, to Leah's point, or where it is, then how can you have any kind of assurance that you're actually meeting the business's kind of government security security governance, information protection standards. So, to the point earlier, if somebody came to you with a legal requirement of going away and finding something, would you be able to do that? Would you know that you're getting the right version? And then to Leah's slide, is it going to take you 9 hours to find that? So really what it's about is it's kind of getting that controlled view. We have most organizations use Microsoft 365. It is the kind of the #1 collaboration platform globally, with a staggering number of users. And what obviously happens is that SharePoint Online is used as a storage mechanism, a records management solution of sorts, and it kind of goes like wildfire. It grows organically. So again, to Leah's point, you might have a version 1 of something, and even though you can do multi-party editing, so several people editing the same file at the same time, people will always do a 1, then I'll save it to my desktop on my OneDrive and finish it later. Then you get 1.1 and it all becomes out of sync. And then SharePoint additional storage, so over the amount that you would get as part of your license, is really expensive. I mean, it's multitudes more expensive than any cloud storage you can get, really. So what is representative of here is that, what you need to do is make sure you have the right data in the right places. So short term, SharePoint's great at that. So your kind of active documents that you're working on, you're still collaborating on, that's what SharePoint does really well. Beyond that, if you have a medium-term requirement, so to keep something for a relatively short term up to a longish, so it could be up to 10 years, then there are multiple different archiving, e-archive type solutions. So you'll have like Microsoft 365 Archive and I say a whole plethora of other ones. They are typically a cheaper tier of storage, so they don't necessarily lend themselves to easily accessing files that have been archived. So it very much is kind of like dark data. You won't necessarily know what's there unless you go away and do a whole discovery piece. And then where we kind of sit is right on the end. So for high value digital assets that effectively you want to keep for either the long term or in compliance. And again, you'll see the kind of the cost associated to these different tiers shrinks. And that's not only because as you move to the right, our storage is really cheap. We typically leverage Azure Blob storage behind the scenes, and we don't put anything on it. So it is really cheap. But also the other reason why the cost kind of narrows as you head towards the right is because the amount of data that you're retaining is also shrinking. So it's just not only is it about organizing the data, it's also about organizing it into the right pot efficiently. And this slide really is just to kind of, because again, we do get questions sometimes that are like, well, Preservica is just an archive solution. What makes you different? We're not really an archive solution. As I say, we are born from preservation, which is something that we've been doing for over 20 years. So we kind of archive by proxy of the fact that we preserve. So like we said earlier, effectively we're taking it out. It's in immutable storage. Everything is tracked. There's absolute confidence that the data in there is easily discoverable, and that it's going to meet compliance requirements because, as I say, everything is audited. It's a 4 eyes deletion process, so no one person could go in there and delete it. So again, from a long-term perspective, we have all of those specific cadences that aren't delivered by typical archiving solutions, to give organizations that kind of long-term peace of mind, really. Leah, I think it's back to you.
Thank you. All right, so continuing on this kind of chaotic situation of content kind of living everywhere, duplicate versions and all of that. Many people might be familiar with this acronym, whether it's ROT or RIOT. We're going to stick with the RIOT. It's just a little bit more inclusive of a few other things. So that RIOT that we really want to understand within the organizations is what content is redundant. Is that redundancy due to it being duplicate information just stored in multiple areas? That is causing confusion for people. That inaccessibility, personally for me, when we're talking about this digital preservation, this inaccessible piece of duplicate or erroneous content is a big one. So content can exist. If it's a WordPerfect document or anything older, it can exist, and it's going to sit there and sit there and sit there and digitally collect dust, and that's it. However, there isn't much value to that dusty old WordPerfect document if you can't open it and actually see the content within it. So at that point, if you can't access it and you don't know what's in it, is there value in keeping it? Do you just dispose of it? Maybe the format again is like WordPerfect, it's obsolete. We know the speed in which technology it's exponentially racing. It's faster than we can even keep up with it. So formats are becoming more obsolete faster and faster. But we want to make sure that anything of value, those vital records, those long-term documents, maybe it's even patents or historical information of value to an organization's history. We want to make sure that they're not only available, but they're accessible. Obsolete content, again, we want to make sure that content that is in our solutions, it's centralized as well as it's up to date. We want to make sure that people are accessing current, accurate, and appropriate, I guess, information. And if it's no longer required by the business, then it needs to be we need to get rid of it, again, to reduce that risk for the organization. Again, that keeping with compliance of legislation and legislation and regulations, whether again you're looking at ARCs and ORCs or TOMRMs, we want to make sure that we're maintaining that compliance with these retentions to reduce that risk for the organization. The last one that we'll talk about with RIOT, it is, again, depending on the terminology, it is either trivial content or kind of transient content. These are documents of very low value. They're not, they're usually drafts, maybe templates, so temporary files. They're maybe getting updated all the time. So again, people aren't keeping a version 1, version 2, version 3. We can maintain kind of that stacked version history within SharePoint. Again, reduce that storage cost. And just make sure that, again, it's relevant to what the business needs it to be rather than outdated and incomplete and inaccurate information. This RIOT, this clutter of RIOT is what makes governance so much harder than it needs to be. If we, again, knowing is half the battle in properly governing your documents. You need to know what you have in order to manage what you have. So you can't manage what you don't know you have. You're just kind of throwing everything in and hoping everything kind of fits into a bucket. So knowing what you have is the biggest first step that people need to take when either wanting to just clean up their current environment or, again, take that next step into that digital preservation. We don't just want to, again, as many people or organizations have done, that kind of lift and shift approach. We don't just want to lift everything and put it into another solution, whether that be a cloud option or a digital preservation solution.
You've got to have solid foundations, right, Leah?
Yes, exactly. So when RIOT is not addressed, there are many impacts to an organization. And it ripples. If it's happening in one area and it hasn't happened next, it'll probably, other areas will start to feel it as time moves on. Storage and migration costs can increase, again, because you've got duplicates of content that you don't need anymore, and you're keeping it around. So again, those storage costs start to skyrocket. High value information, so those vital records, those maybe there's patents. Living in Calgary, I've worked in oil and gas industries. There's drawings and there's all this vital information. It gets buried, and people again don't know what's accurate and current and is what they need when they need it. So we want to make sure that what is kind of garbage or not needed or can be kind of disposed of is kind of going through that records life cycle in order to reach disposition. And then what needs to be kept can be digitally preserved and is accessible to people. Legal and compliance risks increase. Again, anybody who gets FOI requests. You get that FOI request, you have to produce anything that you have, whether it is a copy or not. If you have 6 different versions of one document, the final, you've got to submit those other kind of drafts or temporary documents to support that, because it's something that you have in your possession, and those could have conflicting information, and that's where you might find yourself in a pot of hot water at the end of the day, and we don't want that. We want things to we want organizations to maintain compliance and reduce that risk. We don't want to be spending money where we don't need to be. Additionally, when users are having trouble finding information, don't know what's current, accurate, they lose interest. That user adoption rate really decreases. People kind of go back to their own solutions, which is usually storing things on OneDrive or on their desktop. And then at that point, it's really inaccessible to anybody, and it makes it harder to collaborate on content. If people kind of revert back to, well, what has worked best for them, what do they trust, and is going to make their jobs easier. We want this whole process to make end users' jobs easier. We're not trying to make it we're not trying to make it harder for them. Over time, again, we see technology on an exponential rise. Format obsolescence is a serious threat to that long-term access. Again, I was working with a client earlier this morning, and we went into what they called their archive, and it's full of WordPerfect. I can't open it, they can't open it. So then what's the value in having it there? There's the storage costs with that, again, just balloon. And there's other options that can help reduce that as well. Do you need them? If you can't open them, are they valuable? Get rid of them. So there are some choices, and some of them might be difficult conversations to have. But in the end, it's managing that governance of the organization. What's best for the business, what's best for the organization, and minimizing and mitigating those potential risks and costs. All right. In a couple slides here, there's going to be some work for everyone on the call. Don't worry, it's very easy. It's just a couple questions. But we just kind of want to see where people kind of fall within this spectrum. So what I will be showing here, I'll just jump to my next slide, are just some common scenarios. So at this point, we just want to kind of think, well, I want you guys to think and just to give us an idea of where your organization fits in. Usually they fit into one of these 3 scenarios. Maybe it's kind of, I think of it as a spectrum. If you're not maybe perfectly modernized all on the cloud, but you're not completely still stuck on prem, file share, maybe physical records as well. So in the next few slides, there'll be a poll that comes up that we would like you all to really participate in. Just again, get a feel of the room here, quote unquote. Once we, regardless of kind of who is kind of where, we will kind of talk through some of these scenarios and outcomes and kind of that framework that we want to take into consideration. And again, this framework can be applied at any point, regardless of where you are in your journey of kind of this digital transformation. We're not here to judge you. Again, it's just to recognize kind of the, where you might be able to see yourself in these next few slides. Noelle, have you sent out the poll?
Yes.
All right, so we'll just give everyone a few minutes, or a few seconds, half a minute to a minute, to kind of answer the poll, and then again we'll just move on. Am I able to see the results, Noelle, or?
I can see them.
Well, a lot of our audience are in SharePoint and could use some improvement. Some others are on premises, and just a
Yes.
few that are not currently organized.
That's all right. That's fun though. Just get to find. I love the discovery phase.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting.
just going through everything. That's where my love of archives has come in. A little digress, but I remember doing my history degree. One of the intro classes was go to the university archive, and we went in there, and I was just like, I am home. This is, I want to just go through all the boxes. So I love it. All right, we'll move forward to the next poll.
There we go.
Perfect. So yeah, how familiar are you with digital preservation?
Most of the responses coming in said that they are somewhat familiar. We know about it, but haven't taken action.
Which is
That's
interesting. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, because a lot of times we talk to various different industries. They don't even know, or hasn't even crossed their mind, that they may have assets that they need to retain from a compliance perspective, but have no mechanism of necessarily opening them at some point in the future, or they're keeping really old infrastructure around just to, on the odd chance that they may need to access something. So yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for submitting your answers. We'll move on to framework. So the scenarios that we presented, again, they range from, again, being from entirely on-prem to maybe that hybrid on-prem network drive with SharePoint to maybe all and completely on SharePoint. They can either be messy, they're inconsistent, they it's inconsistently governed. So everyone, I know I'm working with an organization right now, and they launched SharePoint and gave everyone freedom. So now we're having to go in and clean up a lot of that and make sure that there's this governance across the organization for either creating those libraries and managing content consistently. Wherever you land on this spectrum of where your organization is, where the content is living, it's what we'll get into next here is this framework, and it is flexible. You should be able to kind of put yourself somewhere along this spectrum and kind of and see your organization here. So you should be able to see yourself in this framework. So the target state, what looks good? What is the ultimate goal? This might not be kind of the perfect and all perfect, but what should you be kind of aiming for at that top level? Again, reducing that rot. Ooh, am I up on my? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I hadn't scrolled down in my notes. So again, this target state, what looks good, what's really going to give you that handle on maintaining that governance is, again, reducing that rot. We all have it. Even in my personal files, I've got copies and crap that I could probably go through, whether it's digital or in my closet behind me in a cardboard box. We all have it. We want to make sure that we have a clear migration and rationalization for how this is going to happen. This is not just a one-time cleanup. Over time, documents are still going to kind of get stacked. People are going to be saving things that maybe they shouldn't or they don't know. And so it's a continuous process, as we all know, is records management. It's not a one and done program. It's something that continuously evolves and gets and should have attention made to. So again, this ongoing strategy on what content is needing to be migrated, why are we migrating it? I always tell people, if you're at that point where you're like, I may need it, you probably don't need it. And if you do, it's probably very simple to create in the end. Not a hard and fast rule, but usually if you're hemming and hawing and you haven't touched it for maybe 5 years, just break up with it and move on. We also want those controlled permissions. So again, instead of opening everything up to the organization and allowing them the kind of freedom to organize and create what they feel works for them, again, we want to balance that, what the business unit needs versus what the organization's expectations are, but limiting kind of maybe creation power when it comes to site creations and knowing which sites you're creating potentially in your, I'm going to use SharePoint because that's probably what most people are using in SharePoint. We also want to have predictable structures, again, libraries and content types, again, supporting that records management piece for kind of that I'm going to say short-term kind of disposition, getting rid of things, those financial documents after 7 years. We want to make sure things are consistently coming in and then being disposed of accurately. And that's really managed through kind of those libraries and content types and other structures established in that SharePoint creation. We also, again, most people have said they're familiar with digital preservation, but having a digital preservation kind of strategy that does support compliance with the organization. So it's many people might have a governance strategy and a records management strategy. That preservation strategy is also a very big one. Again, in order to rationalize and understand what is being kept long term. The outcome of all of this is, again, going to reduce those costs for you. You're going to have less storage that you're having to manage and pay for. People are going to feel more comfortable and confident and within the system that they're now having to use on a daily basis. And again, it reduces those costs, and that's really what we want the organization to have and to be, is cost efficient. So the framework that I'm going to be talking about now is there's kind of these 4 different phases. So this first kind of step is this discover and assess. So again, understanding what you have and where the risks may be. At the same time, retention and disposition can be parallel to this. So if you are already actively processing documents for disposition, submitting them or putting them through for destruction and approval, that can still all happen at this point. So it's not just this has to happen first, you have to put your disposition on pause. No. This can all happen in parallel. Content that's complete and clearly needs to be kept. Again, some of that historically valuable content can often be moved to preservation early. So we don't have to put it, if it doesn't already live, say, in SharePoint or in the cloud, we can get it right into that preservation solution immediately and make sure that we're tracking it and having it accessible for people. Again, the steps that come afterwards, and even kind of what I just mentioned, they don't have to happen A to B to C to D. They can all happen in parallel, and it's very flexible, and we want this process to be very intentional as well. The next piece of the framework is this organize and govern. So again, as I've said, you can't manage what you don't know you have. So you've done that discover and assess. If you've already done that, it's time to organize and apply that governance to it. We want to focus on the structure, permissions, and consistency of all of that together. AI and automation is a potential support here that you can elicit, just depending on kind of where your organization is at with trusting some of those artificial intelligence fields and agents. Planning is critical. Especially around kind of who owns the content and again, who can access the content. I know working with a current client of mine, there's tons of, in a way, duplicate or content within departments, but we all know where the source material is. Say employee files and people and culture content is all living with that people and culture or human resources department, but people still want to have kind of a little piece of the pie so that they can still easily access things. That's totally fine. That'll all be part of kind of your governance. Yes, people can keep employee files within the business unit, maybe for 2 years. Or if that employee leaves, maybe they keep it for another year. But ultimately, the official source of truth is within people and culture or human resources for that 7 years, I believe, after that person has been terminated or has left the organization. Terminated is such a harsh word. Again, these activities happen alongside the retention that's already happening. So we're not pausing any part of this that you guys have already started and where you are currently in your journey. The next one is that retain and dispose piece of the framework. So retention and disposition is where your policies are actually brought into action. So once you have the policy, the governance and the policies and the procedures and the hows, now you can start to execute things and actually put things into action. There's audibility when it comes to having that documentation and then that actual retain and dispose process. It provides defensible deletion. If you just start deleting things and you again get that FOI request and things need to go on legal hold and something's not there, again, organizations are finding themselves in a bucket of hot water, and it's scary. So this again, we want that life cycle of all of our content to be taken into consideration. When retention is clearly defined and potentially automated where possible, organizations reduce their risk and again, free up resources. Not only resources, but that storage that we've talked about before. The last piece of the framework that I will jump into, I'm trying to be conscious of the time here, is that being able to preserve for long term. So again, we know what we have. If we've already done that, let's go into kind of this strategic piece of that framework and identifying those policies, procedures, governance, maybe even communications. How is this going to be communicated to the organization? We're getting rid of content or we're keeping content because we know it's either historically valuable, it's vital records, we know they're, again, engineering drawings for buildings or pipelines. We're keeping those. Now it's taking what we've identified and created and saying, yeah, this needs to be kept for maybe this is part of the strategy where it's like, okay, anything at that 20-year mark, we're going to make it so it's digitally preserved, and that makes it accessible down the line. So when it comes to kind of that strategy and determining and planning for that long-term preservation, we really want to make sure that we're identifying what triggers within. So again, that strategy work, what is triggering these long-term preservations. We're transferring records at the right point in their life cycle. So again, either identifying things that are maybe active, inactive, and then maybe they're archived, where that active is that collaboration realm. Everyone can access it. That inactive has maybe been moved into a reduced access area where it's more in maybe Purview. And it's just kind of the records management realm and official and people using it, professionals. But the content's still accessible by request. And then there's that kind of archive piece where it's really reduced access. Nobody can access it, but it is accessible if somebody does need it for whatever reason. Again, preservation isn't just storage. We're making sure that information it remains trustworthy, it has integrity, it has authenticity, and it's accessible. It's one thing to just keep a document, again, as I said, a word perfect document for 100 years, but if you can't open it, there's really no value attached to it. The content is essentially lost and you're just wasting storage space. So Neil, I will pass it back over to you.
Perfect, thank you, Leah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so basically we Preserve365, part of the Preservica suite, is an extension into SharePoint, Microsoft 365. And then in terms of what Leah was just talking about from an accessibility perspective, it means that users can use the familiar search tooling in SharePoint, the search bar at the top, to find assets that are in Preservica. And equally, we can stub. So if you move a file into the archive, you can effectively click the stub and it will render it in much the same way. So it drives that accessibility without a huge amount or any really user adoption. because users, to say, they either use the familiar search terms or just browse to the folders that are aware of and then click the file. But effectively what we're showing here is that because of the way that we have built the tooling, working really closely with Microsoft, you can kind of go from a very simple perspective on the left and then all the way through to more complex automation requirements on the right-hand side. So as I say, at its simplest level, we support a kind of a right-click, move or copy. We have extensibility with Purview. So as Lee was talking about, the disposition, you can apply a label in a couple of years, and that will then move that asset over to Preservica, where we will then hold it for however long you want. Power Automate is a great tool as well. So we've got two Microsoft certified connectors, one for move, one for copy. And there's not a lot you can't do with Power Automate, to be perfectly honest. If you're trying to drive automation in your business, it's fantastic. And then obviously, again, like we mentioned earlier, AI is hugely topical, and therefore, organizationally, you can build your own kind of Copilot Studio agents, and you can use those agents to kind of go away and find a lot of stuff. So, almost like an hourglass, do something that would normally take me a lot of time, like find assets, come back to somebody, make a human in the loop type decision, and then go away and do something else, which could be, move to the archive. So because we work collaboratively with Microsoft, we're fully embedded in the Microsoft ecosystem. We maintain the access control permissions of the files. Everything's encrypted at rest and in transit. So you can be absolutely assured that only the people that have got authorization to access the file as it is currently will continue to have those permissions as, excuse me, as we move forward. And then again, just back to this slide. So, what does good look like in terms of what Leah was talking about earlier? It looks like having the right data in the right places, so that you're not got a proliferation of kind of RIOT data in SharePoint, and equally the stuff that's in your archive solution isn't a photo of somebody's cats over the years. It is the data that you need, and equally into Preserve365 as well. Again, you don't want to go away and do a legal discovery case to then pull back an old Alanis Morissette MP3 or something. And then I think, Leah, this back to you for the planning.
Yes. So we've done the strategy. We're working on the planning. What's expected of kind of after you've done all the strategy planning? What you can do is to get these goals. These are just takeaways. So, oops. Oh, what is with my, sorry, my notes are a little, so again, we kind of these next steps, once you've done kind of the planning, that framework, that creating that foundation for what is going to happen, you can now start to get either, again, these business units, these different departments involved for, again, inventorying their content, understanding who should be owning it. Is it a copy? Again, implementing these policies and procedures, getting people to, again, change up maybe how they've organized their content. So it's a little bit, everyone's kind of doing the same thing. There's that consistency across a single platform. And then again, kind of that later, once people know what they have, they're applying some governance to it, then that compliance can really take force. And it's really not much extra work if you've got people to go through their content and applying kind of those governance pieces. This is also where organizations might identify, say, that RACI, who's responsible, accountable, who's consulted, and who's just for information, so that they can track where that business unit or the organization is at, and that long-term maintenance of the program as well. Because again, it's not just a one and done task. This is something that is an ongoing program that organizations need to be aware of. So again, just when we're planning outputs, I'm just gonna jump through to where the whole slide for you guys. I know we're running short on time. But again, kind of these usually these key players when it comes to either identifying systems, duplicate systems, the records manager, to making sure that the retention is ready to go, any constraints, or again, supporting IT and identifying content that's in a bunch of different solutions. And then again, getting those stakeholders, or that the business, the corporate business as a whole, to identify what are those high value, what's that high value content. Is content that they are collecting actually theirs, or is it content that maybe another organization could even be should own on behalf of them? And again, adopting those governed workspaces. So kind of these three departments that are usually heavily involved, or three areas that are usually heavily involved in identifying content systems. These are some main things that they could be kind of doing immediately to make this kind of framework, give that framework a little bit of a leg up in starting. What we do see, in order to kind of have that ideal scenario, that kind of perfect plan, these are some things that we do see as kind of pitfalls, or what's the word I'm looking for, kind of barriers going forward. So there's no clear project sponsor. This person is your champion. You want someone who understands what's going on, the implications of non-compliance, the risks associated. You want that person to be cheerleading this project on, and who will die on every hill for you. Not having a clear communication plan. So again, identifying who's going to be sending out, this is what's happening, these are the steps, and having it come from a person who does have kind of organizational authority, rather than just some department head A over here is saying one thing, and it could be similar but different than department head B on this side. That clear, unified communication on where it's coming from. No clear completion deadline. Again, is it a goal or is it a dream? But also leaving room for flexibility. Not everything is going to kind of finish as is. Things happen, emergencies come up, people get sick, people love vacation, people want to take their owed time. Just be flexible, but also kind of be like, this is what we're aiming for. Also, again, with that completion deadline, is having unrealistic timelines is really a barrier. Again, businesses are there to make money, and we don't want to take too much time away from those day-to-day tasks, when they should be doing what they're hired to do and everything. Again, also, people or organizations really start these processes just kind of out of thin air. There's no support, there's no governance, there's no policies and procedures supporting this kind of this major project that's going to happen, and transformation of an organization. So skipping that planning stage could ultimately cost the organization a heck of a lot more than if you were just to take maybe a month, or maybe more than a month, sorry, maybe 6 months to a year in planning, and have a clear pathway forward in how this is going to get completed. The last little bit went a little fast, but I'll pass it back over to Noelle.
So we'll now open the floor to questions. So feel free to drop any more questions in the chat. While we're waiting for those to come in, I'd like to mention again the idea of the Digital Transformation Lifecycle Workshop. If that is something you guys would be interested in, please feel free to say yes to the poll. That feedback will help us decide whether to move forward with planning with it. And if you're watching the webinar recording, feel free to email us if you're interested. And one more thing before I pass the questions to Leah and Neil. If you'll be in New York City on March 3rd for ARMA NYC, we'd love to see you. Gravity Union and Preservica will have a booth, and our CEO, Mike, will also be presenting. So please drop by and say hello. All right, so into the questions. Leah, we have one here. Someone is interested in the studies that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, the
It's a
study on kind of using time going into finding information.
yes,
Let me put that as a takeaway, and I can we can send that out with the link to the recording. I'll dig back in my notes and find that for you.
perfect. Yes, we'll include that in the slides that we will send over via email. We have another question here, which I believe Neil already responded to. What is the recommended approach for working with challenging groups who struggle with records management? Should we focus on education first or establish structure and governance before introducing training? But Neil already responded to it via chat, but Leah, if you have anything to add, feel free.
Oh, I think I need to hear the question again.
For sure, for sure.
It was quite a large one.
I think in reality you spoke to it, Leah, because as I was typing it about champions, change champions, and things like that, you actually started talking about it. And I was like, okay, I'll just hit enter then. So it was quite timely. But yeah, it was basically like, do you put the system in first, or do you work on training the users? It's great to have a champion, like I said earlier, an evangelist that's in that team already, but equally important to have the foundations in place so that as they get trained up, they can do so on a live system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that answers it quite well.
Okay. Another question that popped up is, what is the best way to handle digitization of thousands of paper documents?
Yeah, so I don't know Gravity Union. You have to forgive me. I don't know if digitization is something that you have in your kit bag. From our perspective, like we mentioned earlier, we have a partner ecosystem with a kind of a best of breed. As part of that, we do have partners that specialize in large digitization projects. There could be millions of records. So they'll basically scan them and then they'll do all the metadata and all that kind of fancy stuff. But yeah, it's typically they're specialist organizations that have like these massive machines that will go through that process. I'd say, Lee, no, forgive me, I don't know if that's something that you offer at Gravity Union.
No, at this point, we can offer support for creating kind of the strategy documents for that, and kind of what like the when you scan it, what's the view. Yeah, I'm losing my words there. But that strategy to then take that and know that this is what needs to happen. But then yeah,
Sure.
we would probably then point you in the direction of someone who's got more of that familiarity and even the tools to do that mass digitization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would just say, Douglas, if you're interested in hearing more about that, or you have a specific requirement, if you want to reach out to Leah or Noel, then they can get in contact with us, and we can potentially put in contact with somebody else. But the history of our business, that's where we've effectively come from. Not us physically doing the scanning, but a lot of it bore from managing or preserving those scanned assets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. We have one more question right here. What are some methods to develop retention schedules to make digital record keeping easy and compliant?
That's a good
Oh, Will's
question.
got his hand up. Can you speak, Will? Can you come off mute? Yeah, I mean, there are tons of methods and methodologies. I mean, as I say, one of the things that we do is the extensibility of Purview labels. Oh, hello.
Hello. Yeah, I was just wondering, like when we talk about like methods, like is there like good examples out there of like either like I've heard in the past like big bucket is the way to go, and I've heard different things like some when I was attending a webinar through ARMA, some people are like, we only have two retention codes, permanent and like not permanent or something like that. And I'm just curious, how is there a way to design like retention schedules, like because there's like all sorts of different ways from LGMA to there's like provincial ARCs and ORCs to like how the federal government does it. There's also the Australian methods. And
Yeah, I know for practical execution that I've seen with clients is it's not the greatest answer. It's a balancing act. Understanding the solution that you're using and limitations on that solution are really going to kind of shape how you configure it. Just from my experience, Purview, there are limitations when it comes to Purview. Once you've kind of created a label, you can't get rid of that label. It is there, it is done. You can't delete it, and you have a limit of 1,000 of those. So again, maybe you don't want 2 buckets. You don't want to limit yourself too much, but a little bit more of like a medium bucket approach where you can identify just a little bit more on a granular level. Because again, those limitations, because again, it's a continuous program. Things are going to change, legislation's going to get updated, things might adjust over time. Another system that I'm familiar with is CollabSpace through Collabware. They're a lot more flexible. You can have infinite number of labels and policies and events in your system, so you could really go down as granular as you want to. And have tiers as deep as you want. So again, it's really understanding the software that you're using and knowing the limitations. And is there a way to group content that makes sense being grouped together when it comes to labels and retention? So like if you have if retention schedules are based out by maybe department, but every department has a meetings, and then those meetings, they're all managed the exact same way, you probably don't need to create 12 different meeting buckets or policies when across the organization meeting agendas and minutes are managed the exact same way and kept for the exact same amount of time. Does that help make sense, Will?
Yeah, I was also just asking for like the audience too, and yeah, well, thank you.
No,
I
good.
appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions that we have for today. I guess that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you, Leah and Neil, for this informative session. Thank you also, everybody, for coming, and have a great week ahead.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
everyone.